My daughter used my savings for her dream wedding. I did not discover it because she confessed. I discovered it because one rainy Tuesday morning, I asked my bank to print every transfer made from my retirement account. The banker slid the pages across the desk with a look that told me she had already seen something I had not. There were florist payments, a deposit to a luxury resort in Charleston, a designer bridal boutique, a jeweler, a catering company, and besides several transfers, was a name that made my hands go cold. My younger brother, Marcus. I had given my daughter, Olivia, permission to help pay my bills after I spent 3 days in the hospital with pneumonia. I thought I was making things easier for both of us. I had no idea she was using that access to pay for the wedding she said her fiancé's family was funding, and I had no idea my own brother had known from the beginning. Before we continue, welcome to Truth and Dignity Stories. If you believe family should never treat an older parent's savings like an open account, please subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone you trusted spent your money without asking? I would also love to know where you are watching from. My name is Rebecca Clark. I was 68 years old, widowed, retired, and finally beginning to believe that the quiet life William and I had worked for was safe. It was not a luxurious life. My home in Willow Creek, Ohio, was paid off. I had a modest pension from the library, Social Security, a small retirement account, and no debts except the ordinary kind: property taxes, insurance, groceries, car repairs, and the cost of keeping an old home from becoming an expensive problem. William and I had saved for that stability over decades. He was an electrician. I worked at the Willow Creek Community Library. We did not make the kind of money people brag about at dinner parties, but William could repair nearly anything, and I knew how to make every dollar work twice. We packed lunches. We fixed appliances instead of replacing them. We drove our cars until the repairman began greeting us by name. And every month, even when it was only a little, we put money aside. This is not just savings, William used to say as he reviewed our account statements. It is choice. At the time, I thought he meant the choice to take a trip someday. The choice to help Daniel and Olivia if they ever faced a genuine emergency. The choice to replace the roof without borrowing money. But after he died, I understood he meant something more. Savings meant I could stay in my home. Savings meant I could make decisions without asking permission. Savings meant no one could tell me I had become a burden simply because I was older. For years, Olivia seemed to understand that. She was my youngest child. Daniel, her older brother, had always been quiet and practical. More like William. Olivia had been the bright spark in our family. She was creative, ambitious, and impossible not to notice. When she entered a room, when she was little, she would come home from school with paint on her hands and a story she could barely wait to tell. When she was 14, she insisted on organizing a neighborhood bake sale for the animal shelter. When she went to college, she called me crying after her first difficult exam, then called again 2 days later to announce she had passed. She had a big heart. That was why I ignored the warning signs for too long. She met Trevor Hale at a friend's birthday party. He was charming, polished, and worked in luxury event marketing. He knew which restaurant had just opened downtown, which hotel had the best rooftop view, and how to make an ordinary dinner sound like an occasion. At first, I liked him. He brought flowers when he visited. He remembered that I drank tea instead of coffee in the evenings. He helped carry groceries in from my car without being asked. But Trevor also had a way of turning every conversation toward appearances. He talked about the right neighborhood, the right clothes, the right kind of wedding. The first impression tells people who you are, he once said over Sunday dinner. William had been gone for 5 years by then. I looked at Olivia, expecting her to roll her eyes. Instead, she nodded. "You only get one wedding?" she said. I smiled gently. "You only get one marriage, too." Trevor laughed as if I had made a sweet little joke. Olivia did not. When Trevor proposed, she called me before she called anyone else. "Mom," she cried. He asked me on the rooftop at the Grand Meridian. There were candles everywhere, and he had a photographer hiding behind the planters. I could hear happiness rushing through her voice. I was happy for her. I truly was. I wanted my daughter to have love. I wanted her to have celebration. I wanted her to feel beautiful on the day she promised her life to someone. But by the time the ring was barely a month old, Olivia had begun sending me pictures of venues that cost more than William and I paid for our first car. There were vineyard estates, lakeside resorts, glass-walled ballrooms, floral arches that looked like they belonged in a movie. "Which one do you like best?" she asked. "They are all beautiful," I said. That is not an answer. I studied the photos. The garden venue looks lovely. It also looks like it might fit people's budget more comfortably. She became quiet. "Trevor says a wedding should be unforgettable." "Your vows will be unforgettable," I told her. "The rest should be what you can afford." She did not answer for a moment. Then she said, "Mom, I don't want a cheap wedding." I felt a small sadness settle in my chest. "Neither did I," I said. "That is why I waited until I could pay for what I chose." 3 months later, I became sick. It began as a cough that would not leave. I told myself it was allergies. Then, I developed a fever, grew weak, and woke one night struggling to breathe. Daniel drove me to the hospital. Olivia met us there with Trevor. She looked terrified. For all our differences, she was still my daughter. When she saw me in that hospital bed with an oxygen tube beneath my nose, she held my hand and cried, "Mom, I should have noticed you were sick," she kept saying. "You are here now," I told her. The doctors said it was pneumonia. I spent 3 nights in the hospital and another 2 weeks recovering at home. Daniel came by with groceries. He checked the furnace filter, took out the trash, and fixed a loose handrail on the back steps. Olivia offered something different. "Mom, let me handle your bills while you recover." I hesitated. "I can pay my own bills." "I know you can, but you're tired. You should be resting. I can log in, make sure nothing gets missed, and send you a list of what I paid." Her voice was warm, practical, loving. Trevor stood behind her in the kitchen, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "It would take pressure off you," he said. I thought about the hospital bills that would soon arrive, the insurance forms, the stack of mail on the counter, the weakness in my body that made even a shower feel like work. So I agreed. Not completely. I did not give Olivia permanent control of my accounts. I did not sign a power of attorney. I did not add her as an owner. But I let her sit beside me at my desk while I showed her how to pay certain bills online. I gave her access to the checking account I used for utilities, groceries, insurance, and household expenses. "Only this account," I told her, "and only while I am recovering." "Of course," she said. Then she hugged me. I should have listened to the pause before she answered. For the first month, everything appeared normal. Olivia paid the electric bill. She paid my pharmacy balance. She scheduled an automatic payment for my car insurance. Every Sunday, she sent me a short text, paid the water bill, called the insurance company. "Your prescription is ready." I was grateful. I told Daniel how helpful she had been. "She wants to make up for not being around more," I said. Daniel looked at me over the rim of his coffee mug. "Just keep an eye on things, Mom." I laughed softly. You sound like your father. That is not always a bad thing. No, I said. It isn't. Then Olivia started mentioning wedding costs more often. Not directly at first. She would casually tell me that the florist, quote, had doubled. She would say the wedding planner was encouraging them to reserve a second ballroom for the rehearsal dinner. She would sigh about Trevor's family wanting a certain standard for the event. One evening, she came over carrying her laptop. I need your opinion, she said. She sat beside me at the kitchen table and opened a spreadsheet. The total at the bottom was almost $85,000. I stared at it. Olivia. I know, she said quickly. It is more than we expected. It is more than a wedding needs to cost. Trevor's parents are contributing? That is good. And we have savings. That is also good. She bit her lip. But there are some gaps. I looked at her. What kind of gaps? Just deposits. Timing issues. Some vendors need payment before we expected. My chest tightened. Are you asking me for money? Her eyes filled instantly. No. Mom. Not exactly. Not exactly. There are phrases that should make every person stop and listen. Not exactly was one of them. I want you to have a beautiful wedding, I said carefully. But I cannot be responsible for a celebration you and Trevor cannot afford. She nodded too fast. I understand. Then she closed the laptop, hugged me goodbye, and left. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. Then the changes began. My retirement account statement came later than usual. I assumed it had been delayed in the mail. A pharmacy charge appeared twice in my checking account. Olivia said it was a processing error and promised to correct it. The balance in my savings seemed lower than I remembered. When I asked Olivia, she told me I had transferred money to cover medical expenses after the hospital. You were worried about it, she said. Don't you remember? I did not remember. But I had been sick. I had been exhausted. And the oldest kind of manipulation is making someone doubt a memory they should trust. I told myself it was probably true. I told myself I had been under stress. I told myself I did not want to accuse my daughter of anything cruel. Then Carol Jenkins came over for tea. Carol had lived across the street from me for nearly 30 years. She was a retired high school counselor, a loyal friend, and the kind of woman who noticed when a person was hurting even if they tried to smile through it. We sat on the porch with cups of tea and a plate of shortbread between us. She asked about the wedding. I told her the date had been set for late September at a resort in Charleston. Charleston, she said. That sounds expensive. It probably is. Are they paying for all of it? Trevor's family is helping. Carol gave me a look. Helping is not the same as paying. I smiled faintly. You sound like Daniel? No. I sound like a woman who watched her sister go broke, trying to keep up with the daughter's wedding plans. I looked down at my tea. Carol reached across the small table and touched my hand. Rebecca, may I ask you something without you getting upset? You can ask. Have you checked your accounts lately? The question startled me. Of course. Really checked them? I did not answer. Carol sighed. Then check them. Not because I think Olivia is doing something wrong, but because nobody who loves you will be offended by a clear account statement. That evening, I logged into my bank account for the first time in weeks. At first, I saw nothing dramatic. The utility bills were there. The pharmacy. Groceries. A repair payment for my dishwasher. Then, I noticed a transfer from checking to savings for $5,000. And 2 days later, a transfer from savings to an unfamiliar payment service. The memo line read, Event Payment. I stared at it. I clicked on the transaction details. There was no clear vendor name. No explanation. Only a reference number. And the initials O.C. Olivia Clark. My mouth went dry. I searched the previous month. Another transfer. Then another. Some were small enough to hide among ordinary expenses. $600. $900. $1,200. But over 4 months, they added up to more than $17,000. I sat in front of the screen until the room grew dark around me. I did not call Olivia. I did not send an angry message. I remembered what Carol said. Nobody who loves you will be offended by a clear account statement. The next morning, I dressed carefully, placed my identification and account documents in my purse, and drove to the bank. I asked to speak with someone who could print every transfer linked to my checking and retirement accounts over the past 6 months. The banker, a woman named Nora Fields, led me into a private office. She was kind, professional, and did not rush me. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "is there a particular transaction you are concerned about?" "Yes," I said, "but I do not want to assume anything until I see the records." Nora nodded. "That is sensible." She printed the statements. Page after page came from the printer. I watched her stack them neatly in front of me. Then she paused. Her eyes moved to one transfer. Then another. "Is everything all right?" I asked. Nora folded her hands. "Mrs. Clark, I cannot interpret anyone's intentions, but I can explain the activity in your accounts." I looked at the pages. She pointed to the transfers I had already seen. "These payments came from your online banking profile using the same authorized device. Olivia had access to my checking account while I was sick." Nora nodded. "I see that." Then she indicated a different set of transactions. "These are transfers from your retirement savings account into checking Riety." The transfers were followed by payments to wedding-related merchants. My body went cold. "Can you tell which merchants?" She turned the pages toward me. "A floral design company. A venue in Charleston. A luxury bridal boutique. A catering service. A jeweler." My daughter's dream wedding was written across my bank history in black ink. Then Nora pointed to a line near the bottom of the page. "This payment was sent to Marcus Clark." I looked at my younger brother's name. For several seconds, I could not understand what I was seeing. Marcus had been William's best friend before he became my brother-in-law in every way that mattered. After William died, Marcus helped me shovel snow, took me to the airport when I visited Daniel, and told me I should never be afraid to call him if I needed anything. He knew my money was meant to protect my independence. He knew William and I had sacrificed for it, and somehow, he had received money from my account. "Why would my brother be paid from this?" I whispered. Nora looked at me with deep caution. "I cannot answer that, but there is a memo attached to the transfer." My hands trembled as I reached for the paper. The memo read, "Wedding Bridge Loan M. Clark." I read it once, then again. The bank office seemed to become very quiet. Olivia had not simply spent my money. She had borrowed against the trust I placed in her. And Marcus had known enough to put a name on the arrangement. I gathered the pages into my purse. Nora asked whether I wanted to freeze online transfers or remove Olivia's access immediately. I looked down at the list of payments. Then I thought of my daughter smiling beside her wedding spreadsheet. I thought of Marcus helping me carry groceries after William died. I thought of all the ways I had been taught to stay calm, stay grateful, and stay quiet. "Yes," I said, "please remove her access." And for the first time, since I saw my savings begin to disappear, I understood that this was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a plan. I drove home from the bank with the statements in my purse and a strange stillness inside me. I had expected anger. I had expected tears. Instead, I felt as if I had stepped outside myself and become a witness to my own life. The roads of Willow Creek passed by in a blur. The pharmacy where I picked up prescriptions. The grocery store where I had bought Olivia's favorite cereal when she was a little girl. The church where William and I had sat every Christmas Eve. Everything looked ordinary. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. When I reached home, I did not go inside right away. I sat in my car beneath the maple tree and looked at the pages Nora had printed for me. There was proof, not a feeling, not an uneasy memory, not something Olivia could dismiss by telling me I had misunderstood. Proof. My retirement savings had been moved into my checking account in separate transfers. The money had then been sent to wedding vendors or to Marcus. The total was $31,480. $31,000. William and I had worked for that money in pieces. A few $100s set aside after he finished a side job. A tax refund we did not spend. The remainder of an overtime check. Years of choosing the less expensive option because we wanted security more than appearances. And now, it had become flowers. Catering deposits. A designer gown. A Charleston resort. And a wedding no one had asked whether I wanted to finance. I finally went inside. The house was quiet. I placed the statements on the kitchen table and made myself a cup of tea I did not drink. Then I called Charles Whitman. His office assistant asked whether it was urgent. Yes, I said. It is family, but it is also my retirement account. Charles made time for me that afternoon. His office was modest and familiar. Framed certificates hung on the wall. A faded photograph of Willow Creek's old courthouse sat above a shelf of legal books. The coffee machine in the waiting room still smelled faintly burnt. Charles listened without interrupting as I showed him the statements. When I finished, he looked at the pages for a long time. Rebecca, he said gently, you did the right thing by going to the bank before confronting anyone. I keep thinking I should have known. You were ill. You trusted your daughter. Those are not failures. It feels like one. He folded his hands. Trust is not foolishness. Misusing it is. I stared at the payment to Marcus. Why would he be involved? We do not know yet, Charles said. We know he received funds connected to the account activity. We do not know whether he believed he was receiving money you approved, whether he suspected otherwise, or whether he actively helped arrange it. I wanted to defend my brother. Marcus was 4 years younger than me. When we were children, he had walked me home from school after a group of older boys teased me. When William died, he drove over during a blizzard because he worried I would try to shovel the driveway alone. He knew how hard I had worked to save. But love cannot erase a line on a bank statement. Charles advised me not to accuse him before I knew more. Let the evidence build, he said, and let people answer direct questions in their own words. He helped me write a formal request to the bank for complete transaction records, including the account access history, the device used, and the original transfer instructions. He also told me to open a new checking account, move my automatic payments, change every password, and add a verbal passcode to my retirement account. The next day, Nora Fields met with me again. She had prepared a packet with my full transaction history. This may be difficult to read, she said. I would rather read something difficult than live inside a lie. I answered. Nora gave me a small, sad smile. The records showed that Olivia had first logged into my checking account from my home computer while I was recovering from pneumonia. That made sense? I had sat beside her at that very desk and watched her pay the electric bill. But the access history showed something else. She had also accessed my retirement account. The first login happened at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday night, while I was sleeping upstairs. The next morning, $3,000 had been transferred out. Then $5,000. Then another $7,000. Some payments were made directly to wedding merchants. Others went first to Marcus, then were sent to vendors connected to the wedding. Nora placed another printed page in front of me. "This is the note attached to the transfer to your brother," she said. I read it. Temporary bridge loan. Aunt Rebecca approved. Wedding balance due Friday. My stomach tightened. Aunt Rebecca approved. Olivia had not only taken my money, she had used my name to make Marcus believe I had agreed. "Can you tell whether Marcus contacted the bank?" I asked. "No," Nora said. "The transfer instructions were entered through your online profile." "Can you tell whether Olivia changed any contact information?" Nora pointed to a line near the bottom of the page. "Your account notification settings were changed the day after your hospital discharge. Paper statements were selected, but electronic transaction alerts were turned off." I remembered that afternoon. Olivia had sat at my computer and said she was making my bills easier to manage. At the time, I thought she was helping me avoid paperwork. Now I understood she had been making it harder for me to see. I felt the room tilt slightly. Nora noticed. "Mrs. Clark, would you like some water?" I shook my head. "No. I need to finish." There were more transfers than I had first realized. Not all of them were large. That was how Olivia had hidden them. A $1,200 florist payment. A $600 alterations deposit. $900 to a catering company. $450 to a transportation service. Small enough, alone, to look like an unexpected medical bill or home repair. Together, they told the story of a wedding being built out of my future. I left the bank with copies of everything. Then I drove to Marcus's house. I did not call first. I wanted to see his face before he had time to prepare one. Marcus lived in a ranch-style home 15 minutes from mine. His truck was in the driveway. I could see him through the front window, standing in the kitchen with his back to me. When he opened the door, he smiled. "Rebecca, what a surprise." I held up the statement pages. "I need to ask you about a transfer." The smile disappeared. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. "Come in." I stepped into his living room, but I did not sit down. He closed the door slowly behind me. "What did Olivia tell you?" I asked. Marcus rubbed his forehead. "Rebecca, I didn't know the whole situation." "That is not what I asked." He looked toward the floor. "She said you wanted to help with the wedding. Did she say I knew you were receiving money from my account?" "She said you approved it." "Did you speak to me?" "No." "Did you call me?" "No." "Did you ask why a woman who spent her whole life careful with money was suddenly sending you $12,000 to pay for a luxury wedding?" His face collapsed. "I should have." "Yes," I said. "You should have." Marcus sat down heavily on the edge of his recliner. "Olivia came to me crying," he said. "She said the resort was threatening to cancel everything. She said Trevor's parents had backed away from part of the money. She said you were proud of the wedding and wanted to help. But you were tired after the hospital and did not want to deal with the vendors." I stared at him. "She told you I was too tired to deal with my own money? She said you asked her to handle things. And you believed that?" Marcus closed his eyes. "I wanted to believe it. I wanted to help her." "By using my savings?" "I thought it was a loan. She said she would replace the money after the wedding." "With what?" He had no answer. I took a breath. "Did you know she had access to my retirement account?" "No." "Did you know she was moving money without telling me?" "No." "But you knew she was asking you to pass money from me to wedding vendors." His eyes filled with tears. "Yes." There are moments when a person disappoints you so completely that anger becomes almost too small for the pain. Marcus was not a stranger. He was my brother. He had known William. He knew what our savings represented. And still, when Olivia told him a story that sounded convenient, he accepted it because challenging her would have been uncomfortable. "You could have called me," I said. "I know." You could have asked one question. I know. You could have protected me. He covered his face. I know. For a moment, I wanted to forgive him just to end the ache in my chest. But William had taught me something before he died. Peace without truth is only silence. Marcus, I said, I need you to give Charles a full statement. I need every message Olivia sent you. Every email, every text, every detail you remember. He nodded. I will. And you will not warn her before I speak to her. His eyes widened. Rebecca, you had your chance to protect her. Now you will help me protect the truth. I left before he could say anything else. That evening, Olivia called. I watched her name light up my phone. For a moment, I could not move. Then I answered. Mom, she said brightly. I've been trying to reach you. Did you see the invitation sample I sent? No. Oh. It's beautiful. I think you're going to love it. The paper is hand-pressed, and the lettering is Olivia. She went quiet. Yes? Why did you transfer money from my retirement account? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Mom, what are you talking about? The Charleston resort. The florist. The boutique. The catering company. The money sent to Marcus. Her breath caught. I could hear Trevor speaking somewhere in the background, but I could not make out the words. Mom, Olivia said finally. I can explain. Please do. She began crying almost immediately. I was going to tell you. When? After the wedding. When Trevor and I were settled, we would have paid it back. With what money? Trevor is getting a promotion. That is not money you have. I know, but it was temporary. Taking $31,000 from your mother's retirement account is not temporary. I did not take it, she said quickly. You gave me access. I closed my eyes. I gave you access to pay my bills while I was recovering from pneumonia. I did not give you permission to move my savings into accounts for your wedding. You do not understand how much pressure there has been, she said. No, Olivia. You do not understand what you have done. Her crying became louder. Trevor's parents promised things they did not deliver. His mother kept changing what she expected. The deposits were due. Everyone was looking at me like I had failed. And you decided my savings were the answer? I thought you would want to help. I would have wanted to help you make choices you could live with. I would not have helped you build a wedding out of money meant to protect me. For several seconds, the line was silent. Then Trevor's voice came through more clearly. Rebecca, this is not the time. I felt something inside me harden. This is exactly the time. He took the phone. Olivia is upset. We can work something out. There is no reason to make this ugly. My daughter used my account without permission. It was family money. No, I said. It was my money. You were going to leave it to her eventually. The cruelty of that sentence was so calm that it stole my breath. I thought of William. Savings are choice. I thought of Nora placing the pages before me. I thought of Marcus saying he should have called. Then I said, do not ever speak about my money as if my life ends before I have chosen what to do with it. Trevor did not answer. I hung up. A few minutes later, Olivia sent me a message. Please don't cancel anything. We will talk tomorrow. I stared at the screen. Then I wrote only one response. Tomorrow, you will meet with me. Charles Whitman. And your Uncle Marcus? Bring Trevor if you choose. Bring no excuses. I sent it before I could talk myself out of it. The next morning, Olivia arrived at Charles's office wearing sunglasses, even though the sky was gray. Trevor came with her. Marcus was already there. He looked as though he had not slept. Olivia saw him and stopped in the doorway. "What is he doing here?" she asked. I looked at my daughter. "He is here because every person who knew something about my money is going to hear the same truth." Then Charles placed the bank records on the conference table, and for the first time, Olivia saw that I had not come to argue. I had come with evidence. Olivia stood at the door of Charles Whitman's conference room for several seconds before she came inside. Trevor followed behind her, his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on the table. Marcus sat near the window, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The bank records were stacked in front of Charles in careful order. Nothing in that room was dramatic. No one shouted. No one slammed a door. But the truth was waiting on the table, and every person there knew it. Olivia took the chair across from me. "Mom," she said, "I'm sorry. I never wanted it to come to this." I looked at her. "It came to this when you moved money from my retirement account." Her eyes filled with tears. Trevor reached for her hand. Charles spoke calmly. "Olivia, we are not here to insult or embarrass you. We are here because Mrs. Clark has identified unauthorized transfers from her accounts. She needs clear answers." Olivia wiped her face. "I told Mom I was helping with the bills." "You were," I said. "At first, I got overwhelmed." "That is not an answer." Her shoulders fell. Charles slid the first sheet toward her. On March 11th, $5,000 was moved from Rebecca's retirement account. 2 days later, that money was paid to the Charleston Harbor House Resort. Did Rebecca approve that? Olivia stared at the page. "No." On April dawned. $7,000 was transferred from Rebecca's savings into her checking account. The same afternoon, an event payment transfer was made to a floral design company. Did Rebecca approve that? Olivia's mouth trembled. "No." Charles turned another page. On April 18th, $12,000 was sent to Marcus Clark, with a memo that said, "Aunt Rebecca approved." Did she approve that? No. The word barely made a sound, but it changed everything. I looked at Marcus. He had tears in his eyes. "I should have called you," he said to me. "I should have known you would never handle money this way." I let her tell me what I wanted to believe. I did not answer him. Not yet. Charles looked toward Trevor. "Mr. Harley, were you aware of the transfers?" Trevor sat straighter. I knew Olivia was getting help from her mother. "Did you know she had access to Rebecca's accounts because Rebecca had been ill?" He did not answer. "Did you know Rebecca had not approved the wedding payments?" Trevor looked at Olivia, then back at Charles. "I knew there were problems with the budget," he said carefully. "That was not my question." His face tightened. I knew some money was coming from her mother. I felt the pain move through me slowly. Not sharply. Not all at once. Trevor had looked at me and called it family money. Now he admitted that he knew enough to understand it was mine. "Why?" I asked him. He looked surprised that I had spoken. "Rebecca, why was my security less important than a wedding?" He glanced at Olivia again. The deposits were due. We had already invited people. There was pressure from both families. "Pressure does not give you permission," I said. He looked away. Olivia began to cry. I was scared. She whispered. Everything kept getting bigger. Trevor's parents kept asking about the venue. His mother wanted the waterfront reception. The planner said we would lose deposits if we did not act fast. I listened. I knew it was wrong. She continued. At first, I told myself I would take a little and replace it. Then another bill was due. Then another. Every time I moved money, I thought it would be the last time. I looked at my daughter. Did you think about what would happen if I needed that money? She covered her face. I told myself you had enough. You told yourself that I had enough? The room was silent. Olivia, I said softly. Your father and I saved that money because we knew life can change in a moment. I was in a hospital bed when you gained access to my account. I was sick. I was frightened. I trusted you. I know. No, I said. You know now. But when you were spending it, you treated my future like something you could borrow from. She cried harder. Trevor shifted in his chair. We can pay it back, he said. Charles looked at him. With what funds? Trevor's face went still. The answer was clear. They did not have the money. They had planned a wedding around money they did not own. Then tried to call it a loan, because that sounded better than what it was. Marcus spoke quietly. Trevor's parents backed out of their share after they learned the final price. Olivia came to me panicked. She said the wedding would collapse. I gave her access to a line of credit because I thought Rebecca had approved it. He looked at me. I should have asked you. I should not have helped move $1 without hearing it from you. I took a slow breath. Why didn't you? Marcus looked down. Because I wanted to save Olivia from embarrassment. I nodded sadly. And that is how you helped her create something worse. No one argued. Charles explained the options in plain language. I could make a formal report to the bank. I could ask them to investigate the transfers. I could pursue repayment through civil channels. I could also provide the documents to law enforcement for review. He did not tell me what to do. That mattered. For too long, people had talked about my life as though I were not present. Now, everyone waited for my decision. I looked at Olivia, then at the statements, then at the old hands I had spent a lifetime using to work. Care for people, turn pages, cook meals, and keep my family together. I will file the report, I said. Olivia inhaled sharply. Mom, please. I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing it because this must be named honestly. Please don't ruin my life. Tears filled my eyes, but my voice remained steady. I did not ruin your life, Olivia. I refuse to let you ruin mine. That was the hardest thing I had ever said to my daughter. Harder than saying no when she wanted something I could not afford. Harder than letting her leave for college. Harder than standing at the door after an argument and wondering whether she would call. But it was true. The bank opened an investigation into the unauthorized transfers. Charles arranged for Olivia and Trevor to provide their own financial records and written explanations. Marcus gave a full statement and turned over every message Olivia had sent him. Those messages showed the truth more clearly than any argument could have. I'm just borrowing it. Mom will understand later. She has plenty saved. Please don't call her Uncle Marcus. She's still recovering and I don't want to stress her out. Every sentence felt like another piece of trust being pulled apart. The Charleston wedding did not happen. At first, Olivia tried to save it. She asked whether they could keep the resort and cut smaller details. Then she asked whether we could use the deposits already paid. But Trevor's parents refused to give more money. The vendors had cancellation policies. The florist kept part of the deposit. The resort kept another part. The rest of the wedding was canceled. Olivia and Trevor got married 6 months later in a small courthouse ceremony with only a handful of people present. I was invited. I did not go, not because I wanted to hurt her, because I was not ready to stand in a room and celebrate while the damage was still being counted. Trevor and Olivia separated soon after. I heard it through Daniel at first. Then Olivia told me herself. He said I made him look bad. She said during one painful phone call. You both made choices. I told her, the consequences belong to both of you. I thought he loved me. He may have, but love that asks you to betray the people who trust you is not a safe love. She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, I don't know who I am without all of this. For a moment, my instinct was to rescue her, to offer money, to invite her home, to make the pain go away. But that was the pattern that had brought us here. So I said, "Then you need time to find out who you are, when you stop letting fear decide for you." The bank eventually recovered a portion of the money from accounts that had not yet been spent. The rest could not be restored immediately. Too much had already gone to vendors and unpaid wedding balances. But Olivia signed a repayment agreement through Charles's office. She sold the expensive engagement ring Trevor had purchased on credit. She moved into a small apartment. She took a second job at a medical billing office and began paying something every month. It was not enough to restore all the money quickly, but it was the beginning of accountability. Marcus sold his fishing boat, which he had been saving for retirement, and returned the money he had received through the so-called bridge loan. "I cannot undo what I failed to stop," he told me, "but I can stop pretending it was not my responsibility." I accepted the check. That did not mean I stopped being hurt. It meant I allowed truth to have a cost. Months passed. I changed every password. I moved my retirement funds into accounts with stronger verification. I met with Charles and updated my estate plan, not to punish my children, but to make sure my future could never again be treated as someone else's solution. Daniel was named as a limited emergency contact, but no one had access to my financial accounts. No one. I began meeting Carol for tea every Thursday afternoon. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. I planted rosemary and lavender in the garden William once planned to expand. My life did not become perfect. It became mine again. Nearly a year after I found the first transfer, Olivia asked if she could come over. She did not arrive with flowers or an expensive apology. She came alone, holding a plain paper bag from the bakery near my house. "May I come in?" she asked. That simple question meant more to me than she knew. "Yes," I said. "You may." We sat at the kitchen table where I had once shown her how to pay my bills. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, Olivia placed a folded document in front of me. "It's the latest repayment statement," she said. "Charles has a copy too. I got a raise at work, so I increased the amount." I looked at the page. Then I looked at her. She seemed older. Not in years. In understanding. "I'm trying to become someone you can trust again," she said. I felt tears rise in my eyes. Trust does not return because someone says the right words. I know. It returns through time. Through honesty. Through what you do when no one is watching. She nodded. "I know." For the first time since this began, I believed she truly did. I did not tell her everything was forgiven. I did not promise that the wound had disappeared. But I told her something honest. "I love you," I said, "and I am willing to see what you do next." She cried quietly. Then she reached across the table, not touching my hand until I turned mine over, and let her. Outside, the maple tree moved gently in the wind. William's photograph rested on the mantel in the next room. I thought about what he used to say. Savings are choice. He was right. But I had learned something more. My savings were not only money. They were years of sacrifice. They were my safety. They were my right to grow older without becoming dependent on the people I loved. And no wedding. No emergency. No family pressure. And no promise of repayment could make it acceptable for someone else to take that choice from me. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to Truth and Dignity Stories, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that protecting your money and your peace is not selfish. And tell me in the comments, if you were Rebecca, would you forgive Olivia after she used your savings for her wedding? Or would you keep your distance until every dollar was repaid?